Well, thank you all for being here. It's really great to have this number of students coming out this early, if you will, in the season, kicking the tires on some new programs that we have coming up. So we're very excited to have you here. I guess the first thing I'd like to do is, how many of you have one of these in your pocket right now, or something that resembles it? Okay. So from the students, because we want to try to engage some student participation here, can I have a couple students tell me what their favorite feature is on this little thing back here?
The haptic display.
Haptic display, okay. Anybody else? Does everybody know what haptic display means?
Nope.
It's the touch-sensitive display. Okay. Anybody else? Yes? Makes phone calls without a big long wire trailing behind you, right? I think 40 years ago, 50 years ago, if somebody said mobile phone that you could use in your automobile, they would imagine this big long spool of wire hanging out the back that would connect you back to your home. How many of you like to play something like Angry Birds or Fruit Ninja? Or I see a couple heads now, yeah. All right, so those are apps, right? So we have haptic technology, wireless technology, or mobile phone calls, and apps, okay? Now, how many of you in this room who plan on going to uni next year are, I'll say, are on the order of 18 years old? Okay. How many of you are on the order of 10 years old? You behave like you're 10 years old, you don't count. Okay. So essentially, for those three technologies, applications, and for the most part modern, I'll say digital mobile phone calls and apps did not exist when you were born. So just in your lifetime, three of the most key enabling technologies for probably your favorite piece of technology didn't even exist, okay? And you're 18 years old. Hopefully your career will span twice that length of time. So you'll work for 35, 40 years, have a nice retirement. 35 or 40 years. So that means that not only is the technology that you're going to work on in the middle of your career not existing today, but by the time you get done with your career and retire, the technology that then gets created is also going to be obsolete, okay? So if that's the state of the art, if you will, if that's what's happening in the world, as educators, as people who are potentially going to give you your tertiary education, what do we have to do to train you to live in that world? And one of the things that Steve sort of touched on is that we have to teach you to adapt as well as to know how to do the smartphone today and whatever is going to replace it tomorrow or in 20 years and whatever is going to replace that in 20 years. So the most important thing we want to focus on when you come to Macquarie University for an engineering degree is we want to teach you how to learn. And we want to teach you how to ask very good questions, as I've already said in the video. We want you to be able to be approached by a problem and not be intimidated by it and go and learn what it takes to solve that problem, because whatever it is that's going to be solving those problems in 20 years hasn't even been invented yet. And you're part of the people who are going to invent it, and then you're also going to be part of the people who are going to be throwing it away and reinventing it again. So the most important thing we want you to come out of Macquarie University with is the toolbox and the skill set to live in that world. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we have to teach you a whole bunch of foundational things so you can understand the world you're in to begin with. So Steve talked about that. That's our foundational information. And the foundational information that we deliver is basically in the first year, the first 3 semesters. And the reason why we do that is because for the most part, although some of you may have mums, dads, uncles, grandparents who are engineers, for the most part, there's probably not an engineer in your life who you know well enough to know precisely what you want to do. So when you come here, we want to expose you to that wide world of possibilities in computer engineering, telecommunications engineering, software engineering, mechanical engineering, and the whole list of what we offer. We want to expose you to the breadth of all the science and all the engineering that you could do here. And then after those first 3 semesters, we want to give you the opportunity to make a choice out of knowledge rather than ignorance. So after 3 semesters, we'll ask you to start taking units that will determine what sort of engineer you're going to be. So that's the foundational information. Over the next 3 years that follow that, you'll take very specific information about the particular type of engineering that you want to do. In the case of Macquarie, that's a sort of a three-braided strand, a three-braided cord of whatever it is that you really want to do, plus a little bit of the other two major types of engineering. So if you really want to be electronics, because that's what I do, if you really want to be electronics, we're also going to ask you to learn a little bit about software and a little bit about mechanical, because engineers in the future need to think in a much more integrated way. You can't just do your little silo of engineering apart from the rest of the world. You need to know how all those different pieces of engineering come together. So you'll take a lot of units in your specific field, you'll take a few units in the other fields of engineering, and you'll come out a much more well-rounded engineer. The third thing we want to do is we want to give you what's called an engineering stream. As we talked about in the video, engineering is somewhat different than science. Well, what makes it different? The thing that makes it different is the way that engineering is practiced. Engineering has to be repeatable, engineering has to be sustainable, engineering has to be responsible to the community, the environment, and the people around us. And there's a whole component of the curriculum that teaches you those skills and makes you aware of satisfying the world around us. So we don't just solve problems, we want to solve relevant problems. We want to solve problems in a sustainable way. And that's part of what we call our engineering or professional stream within the engineering program. And the final thing we want to do is we want to make sure that it's practical and it's practiced. So a couple people in the video talked about our interaction with industry. Macquarie University is well situated at the top of the North Ryde Tech Park. Somebody once told me that about 1/3 of all the telecommunications R&D that goes on in all of Australia happens a stone's throw from Macquarie's front door. So right down here in the few kilometers as you go towards the CBD. That's a phenomenal opportunity for anybody who's technical here at Macquarie, because these people who are doing this cutting edge research, these people who are obsoleting this thing, are doing it right on our doorstep. And they're our neighbors. And they want to come here, and they want you to come there with them. So we're ideally situated to do that final thread, that practical practice thread. And in the last semester that you're here, unlike the first 3 semesters, you're going to get very specific and solve a real problem, most likely with one of the companies over here. Could be Cochlear, working on a new way. Last semester we had a student who worked on an emergency cutoff switch, a wireless emergency cutoff switch. If all of a sudden your cochlear implant starts making a loud buzzing noise, do you think you want to wait 3 days to get an appointment with the audiologist so they can turn it off? I don't think so. That's one amazing headache for 3 days. So this student designed an emergency cutoff switch. Very practical problem, very real world problem, right here on our doorstep at Macquarie University. We have students working with CSIRO on fine positioning systems, how to use this in an emergency to find somebody in a life and death situation. Okay? Real world problems right here on our doorstep, CSIRO in Marsfield. We have 3 or 4 students working on problems along those lines in positioning systems. So we have an amazing, I don't want to say advantage, but amazing opportunity here at Macquarie University because of where we are geographically, and we want to take advantage of that. So I guess without further ado, we'll move on, and that's a little bit about the engineering program here at Macquarie.